Ganesh, can you hear?
It's live.
Yeah, we are live. We still have 5-6 minutes to open up the first session. So, Namita, can you hear us? Okay, no issues. So, still 5 minutes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay, YouTube is also live.
Hello, how are you?
Namita, good to see you.
Hi,
Hi,
Namita.
good to see you.
So we are just in a pre-opening chat. So
Oh,
we'll
lovely.
really go live at 5 sharp, but we can just have a small talk before we go
Sure, sure.
live.
How's the fest coming along? How has the response been?
Uh, been okay. We could have expected better. Uh, as usual, I think for online it is still a challenge to get more people interested. Uh,
Yeah,
but
because I think people are quite fed up of online now.
so I think the saving grace is that we share the YouTube links later quite extensively through social media, and
Okay.
so that way I think more people get to watch it.
What
I
year
think
is this fest?
everybody,
I mean, how many
Sorry,
years is this? How many
this
years has
this
this
is
fest
the
been running?
eighth edition.
Okay.
So it just
Yeah, it
crossed
says
the
here eighth edition.
yeah. So we just crossed the 7 year itch. So we hope so we hope to
I
go
thought that
along.
applied only to marriages.
Sorry,
I thought that 7 year itch term was only used in the context of dating and marriages.
I think it's extendable to all relationships. And
Lovely.
running a fest is also nothing but relationships within the ecosystem.
I
So
know. Very true.
yeah, yes,
Just one
we have.
request, please. One request. If we can have a hard stop at 5:30, that'll be great.
Yeah, yeah, we'll finish on time.
sure.
Yeah, because
We
last
are
time there was
known.
an online event I did where they extended, and then when you're talking, it becomes very difficult to
Hmm,
cut somebody.
yeah, yeah. No, no, we are known for starting and ending on time.
Super. For a change.
Yeah, we I take that as a compliment.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a compliment because most things I go are not as organized. So it's
Mhm.
nice to see that.
Rupangi is joined.
Hi, Benedict.
Hi,
Hi,
good to
Namita.
see you.
Hi, how are you,
Hi,
Rupangi?
Good to
Rupangi.
see you
Sabah here.
both. Hi, Sabah.
Sabah, Subah.
Subha, Subha.
So I'm
We'll
joining
get
in from
started in a minute.
Devachuli in Nepal,
Oh,
and it
okay.
was
Wow.
raining. It was raining. It's an overcast sky, but I got lucky. The rain gods were kind, and it's calmed down a bit.
So is it
So
a
I
natural
thought
background?
that was a photo that you had put. I
No,
didn't
no,
think that you
no.
were actually here. So beautiful.
No, I'm actually in
Wow.
Nepal. It's really scenic here.
Amazing.
Okay, so on your time, it's 2 minutes more, right, on your watches?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Start in 2 minutes.
Hmm. So fabulous titles of both your books, Namita and Rupangi.
Thank you.
I've got my copy of your book.
Okay. Yeah.
Do share feedback after you read it.
So do you have a
Yes,
copy there to show,
absolutely will.
Namita? Namita, do you have a copy to show?
I don't know if Penguin was able to send it on time to you.
No, 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 they weren't. So
Oh,
I
how
don't know, is
sad.
this supposed to be a two-way Q&A or just one-way Q&A?
Oh, just a chat. So basically, to brief you, I'll start with 10 rapid fire questions, which I'd like for you to answer in a few seconds. And then we'll do a brief set of questions, about 15, each of which relate to themes in the chapters that you've covered in your book.
Okay.
So if you could answer those in about a minute and within or under a minute, that'll be
Okay,
great.
I think
So that
I
then
think we
we
are
have enough
yeah
time.
No, I think that's better. I
yeah.
have a bit
I
of a
think
sore throat, so I was telling.
Namita, let's start. Let's
Okay, let's start.
okay. Yep. I'm Benedict Parmanan. Welcome to the second day of the eighth edition of Bangalore Business Literature Festival. Welcome to the audience. Welcome to the speakers. Welcome to Subha.
Thank you, Benedict.
Yeah.
Thanks so
Yesterday,
much, Benedict.
yeah, welcome. Yesterday we had a very interesting uh, day with Ankur Wariku, Gautam Padmanabhan, Govind Ethiraj, and Rukmini. It was quite a riveting day, and I'm sure today will be the same. Looking forward to today's session, and today's lineup is exciting, looking exciting as well. And your host for today is Subha Chandrasekharan. Subha, welcome. Uh, I'll be giving a very, very short, brief introduction of her because I'm going to give a detailed introduction during her session. So she's worked with Citibank and she's now a leadership and career coach. She's also an avid podcaster. She brings in a lot of her business learnings and translates into her blogs and podcast, which she calls Small Talk with Raincraft. You can tell us later why you named your company as Raincraft. So I'll
Sure.
hand it over to you, Subha. All the best to all of you.
Thank you so much, Benedict, and a warm welcome to all of you to day two of the Bangalore Business Lit Fest. It's an honor and delight to be anchoring the sessions this evening. I've attended, BBLF more than once when it was held in person, and I do hope to capture the deep focus and the warmth of this event in the online avatar. So, quickly moving on to our first session of the evening. Let me ask you, what were you doing when you were 7 years old? I'm guessing the most critical things on our mind were about the dinner menu at home or grabbing a little extra time to play downstairs with friends. But as Rupangi's latest book highlights, the world is changing. Today, think founder, innovator, game changer, and the faces are getting younger and younger. As young as 7 year old, can you believe it? And Rupangi has captured so many such stories. So I'm happy to introduce Rupangi Sharma, author, editor, and edupreneur. She is the founder and CEO of EFG Learning, a Mumbai based education consultancy. EFG, Education for Growth, has been her mantra, and she's been laser focused on using the power of technology and innovation to transform learning and teaching. She's worked with the MIT Media Lab in Boston, the Central Institute of Education Technology, and many leading educational institutions in India and abroad, and recently headed content and pedagogy at a nonprofit edtech for low income schools. Rupangi has authored nonfiction stories, including one as part of the Chicken Soup series, a collection of poems titled A Loving Embrace, and a novel on gender biased sex selection. And now, her latest release, Young Indian Innovators, Entrepreneurs, and Changemakers, profiles 65 young Indians aged 7 to 21. These youngsters are effecting impactful change from far flung rural areas, small towns, and urban cities, a genuine promise of an exciting future for India. Over to you, Rupangi.
Thanks so much, Subha. And while Namita needs no introductions, I'd like to quickly tell our viewers about the many hats that you wear, Namita. Namita is the executive director of MCure Pharmaceuticals, a global pharmaceutical company headquartered in Pune with a turnover of $750 million. She is an MBA graduate from the Fuqua School of Business and a chartered accountant from ICAI. She's a recipient of various prestigious corporate awards such as the 40 Under 40 award by ET and top 50 most powerful women in business by Business Today. Outside of work, Namita is passionate about improving women's health in India and promoting entrepreneurship. She's also launched a unique YouTube talk show on women's health called Uncondition Yourself with Namita. She leads Thapar Entrepreneurs Academy that teaches entrepreneurship and is part of the global television show Shark Tank India. And most of you know her as the inimitable shark from the show. So we'll start, Namita, with ten rapid fire questions, which you'd need to answer within a few seconds, and then I'll give
Okay,
you a minute each for a brief set of questions related to the themes in your book. After which we'll take the Q&A from our audience. So
sure.
let's start with the rapid fire round. One word to describe yourself would be
Driven,
okay. How would you define your style of investing as a shark?
authentic.
A defining moment of your life that you'd like to share very quickly.
I think when I became a chartered accountant at 21, a lot of things changed for me in terms of just me loving myself more and then just getting into a different orbit in my life.
That's interesting. What makes you most grateful to have the parents that you do?
That they love me unconditionally in spite of my drama and tantrums, even at this age.
Oh, that's great. A moment when you were at a crossroads as an entrepreneur but managed to make the right decision.
We were
That's a
we were
tough one.
doing yeah, it's a tough one. We were doing some restructuring at MCure, and cost cutting is never easy. And it's this emotions versus rational and what's good for the company. And I was definitely at crossroads, but I went with the company first approach, which is always something that my father's taught me. And at the cost of it emotionally being very taxing, it is something I did, and I'm happy I did because company always comes first. Did I lose you, Rupangi?
Right. Okay. For a moment there, but I think I'm back. All right.
Okay.
So, what is MQR's biggest contribution to the healthcare space, according to you?
I think anemia. More than 50% of Indian women are anemic and they don't even know about it. So I think both in terms of awareness,
Right.
diagnosis, innovative molecules for treatment, that's what it would be.
What was the most memorable moment during Shark Tank for you? I'm sure a lot of viewers are wondering about this as well.
Oh man, the most memorable moment was, a couple of deals where again I was torn between it may not be the best investment, but it's a good message to give to the public, like Jugadu Kamlesh, Pandurang Tavre. And I think those moments I was really torn in terms of do I wear an investor hat or as a business leader who's supposed to give a message to the country hat. And those moments, I think, changed me as a person too.
I can imagine. What is your pet peeve as an investor?
My pet peeve is they accept a certain valuation on the tank, and then when we go out to do due diligence they
Yeah.
suddenly want 3x more after the episode has aired, which obviously in a span of a month we're not going to give them 3x of what we committed on television. And that's
Right.
typically called seller's remorse, which is very common in the US Shark Tank as well. So that's my pet peeve. We've had a few of those.
Super. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But my next question is why did you choose the title The Dolphin and the Shark?
That's very close to my
I
heart
think the
because I think,
shark is self explanatory. Yeah.
yeah, I think today's leader, I mean, I've got, I don't know, 23 years experience in the corporate world now. And I think today's leader
Right.
needs to balance empathy and aggression. So for me, a dolphin stands for empathy, a shark stands for aggression. And I think you can't be one or the other. The day you learn to balance both, not just
Right.
as a leader, but in your personal life as well, I think that's very critical.
Super. What are the top three skills that entrepreneurs must have?
And I've written that in my book. There's a chapter on it called the three C's. And it's basically
The
courage,
pieces, right?
competence, and compassion.
Great. And my last one for the rapid fire question is a bit heavy. Your take on whether the funding winter is expected to continue, and will India overtake China and VC investments despite it?
So the investment winter will continue for a bit because I think there were some very optimistic valuations, and
Hmm.
cash burn was getting a priority over cash flow, which is not the right
Right.
way to look at companies and their valuation.
Hmm.
Yes, you have to make losses for a bit, but then you have to establish a path to profitability, which a lot of startups were not doing and still getting away with very heavy valuations. So the correction is going to take some time, and so I think the investment winter is here for a little bit, but it's good for the country because it'll get people more focused on the fundamentals rather than just aspiring for that fancy word unicorn.
That's so true. So, really quickly, your book addresses personal insights, which are peppered with anecdotes from your journey as an investor on Shark Tank, and also, of course, an entrepreneur who manages a venture currently valued at $750 million, like I mentioned. So, to give our readers a sneak peek of your book, which I'm just going to quickly hold up, the dolphin and the shark. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that tackle the themes your book addresses so very comprehensively. I went through the book and really enjoyed it. Thank you for writing it. I think it's a great book for aspiring entrepreneurs to pick up and read and really delve into your personal journey as well as your learnings, challenges, learnings, and everything that has taken you so far to where you are today. All right. So the first question takes you back to your childhood, and I read a little bit about it, of course, but without giving away anything. What are some important childhood experiences that shaped you and made you who you are?
I think in the book I've written about three specific memories. The first one being how there was so much emphasis on a mark sheet. And that led to low self esteem as a child because I felt a mark sheet is what
Right.
defined me. And the sad thing
Hmm.
is that I still see that continuing today in our country. And so it's a strong message to the youngsters out there that a mark sheet does not define you. You're so much more than a mark sheet. And so I think sharing some of these personal stories gives strength to others who are going through the same thing. Unfortunately, 20, 25 years later. The second set of memories was my mother. She played a very pivotal role because she got married really young, had kids really young, and did not get a chance to pursue her career aspirations. And so the role of a mother in just putting that drive in her daughter and ensuring that she's financially independent, I think that's relevant even today. And I think more and more women need to get back in the workforce because our workforce participation is under 20%, which is really a terrible number. So I think that is an important memory of my mom telling me a lot of bedtime stories to instill that drive. And then the third one is my father. He was a first generation entrepreneur, really struggled a lot to build MCure. And seeing him
Hmm.
go through struggles and never losing his smile, I think made me an eternal optimist. So these are, the three memories that really stand out, and I believe shaped me to become more driven and also kinder.
Lovely. And I actually, what stayed with me was how your mom peppered your walls with
Yeah.
pictures of career-driven women. I think that's a visual which has
And it's
stayed with
funny,
me.
Rupangi,
So
but even today, I know exactly what outfit, what color, what accessories, what heels, what the briefcase looked like. I mean, somehow those childhood memories just, they imprinted on your brain. So till today, I remember everything in those pictures that she put on my walls. And I think that's why um, parents have a very important role they're the first
right,
role models in every child's life.
very true. Um, you went viral for saying out, Namit. I'm out, Namita. So, that's something I wanted to sort of bring to. And I know that everybody here who's watching today remembers that moment in Shark Tank when you said, I'm out, right? And so, tell us a little bit about the four F's of your funding framework, which give you that kind of clarity.
You missed the sentence before I'm out. ये मेरी expertise नहीं है. So, even I
Right.
didn't realize I said it so often because we finished shooting by December 12th and they aired
Mhm.
the show on December 20th. So it wasn't parallel shooting like other reality shows. And so there was
Yeah.
no time for any course correction or looking back and adjusting our styles. But in hindsight, I wouldn't change a thing because I'm selective as an investor. And that's where the I'm out comes from. I think it's important to invest in things where you can add value. It's important to say no if the founder can find another investor who can add more value. So I think it's a win-win.
Right.
For me, I want to be part of journeys where I can add value. For the founder,
Mhm.
they need to find an investor who can help them the
Mhm.
best. So I was very
Right.
selective in the companies I chose to invest in. And so I
Mhm.
stand by my meme that's gone viral. No regret. In fact,
So it's something that you're
that's
proud of.
something I still repeat in any talks, any write-ups. I start with
Right.
that, and it always cracks up the audience.
I can imagine that. And so my next question is, what is MCure's escalator pitch, and what are the ingredients for a perfect pitch?
So I think MQ's tagline is success through innovation. And if you really see why we are in the top 10 in the country in India, it's because we have brought first to market and many
Mhm.
innovative molecules and made it affordable for the Indian masses. And I think the
Hmm.
second elevator pitch that I would talk about MQ is we're very diversified. So when I joined the company
Yeah.
15 years back, 95% of our sales came from India. Today, only
Mhm.
45% of our sales comes from India. So we are in 70 plus
Right.
countries.
Truly
My co-stars
global,
always make fun
right?
of me. They say, "Aap to 70 plus countries mein ho, bolo bolo." So we all rag each other. But that's something
Right.
we are very proud of. That we're truly an Indian company that's made a global mark. So I think these two would be my elevator pitches. That we brought a lot of innovation to India, and secondly, we're truly a global company with presence in 70 plus countries, which is a matter of pride.
Super. You briefly spoke about seller's remorse post investment a little earlier on in our conversation. Tell us a little bit about what this means and how the real work begins after the paperwork starts, and how do investors contribute?
Yeah, so the due diligence is a whole different animal because you have to realize that a lot of these founders are very low revenue, just started off, so they don't have any of
Hmm.
their paperwork in place.
Hmm.
So in due
Right.
diligence, when we're looking at their financials, their regulatory, legal, secretarial paperwork, they have nothing. A lot of them have nothing in place. So something that should be
Right.
taking a month and a half sometimes goes on for 5 months because we're just waiting for them for simple things like converting a partnership to a private limited company. Things like that really delay the due diligence process. And I think where an investor can help is very different. So, different investors at Shark Tank bring different value to the investors. But one thing that we all have in
Right.
common is we all build big brands and we all have
Mhm.
business acumen. And at the end of the day, an investor is looking for two things. One is a little strategic inputs in terms of business acumen, and two is helping them with
Mhm.
fundraise and scaling. And all of us have done that
Right.
in our companies. So that
Hmm.
those are the two strengths: business acumen and fundraising and scaling, which all of us can help these very new pre-revenue or low revenue startups with.
Super. How do you go about building winning teams and ingrain that kind of a culture and the DNA of an organization?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite chapters because I've written a lot about MQ and I've written a lot
Right.
about my father in this chapter. And I think that, a lot of times people ask me that what's the secret sauce that's made
Hmm.
MQ what it is? I mean, he's a first generation entrepreneur and 7,000 crore company. That's not a joke. So
Of
what is
course.
it that made it what it is?
Yeah.
And I always say it's a winning team. And a winning team
Right.
that breeds a winning culture takes a lot of work. Leaders today more and more, like 30 to 40% of
Hmm.
their time has to go in leadership development, managing the talent pipeline, really coaching, identifying the future leaders, the succession plan. And we've done that really well at MQ. So, I always say my biggest leadership mantra is hire people smarter than you, because only people who are
Right.
smarter than you will challenge you, will dissent, and you
Hmm.
can delegate and get that creativity and innovation that takes you to the next level. So we've spoken about hiring people smarter than us and what it takes to then retain them. Because it's one thing to hire them, but then how do you make sure they stick around? Whether it is giving them equity, making them CEOs of the subsidiaries, biotech companies with a long gestation period. How do you change the compensation structure to be
Right.
different than other typical companies which don't have the long gestation period? So I've given a lot of MQ examples in that chapter, and that was a fun part of building winning teams as a chapter. And I truly believe that's what separates mediocre companies from outstanding companies. It's the winning teams.
And that's how you've gone truly global, like you say, right? So, you spoke a little bit right now about dissent and how it's important in an organization. So, what were some moments of the Sharks' dissent with founders and amongst each other that unlock powerful insights?
Oh, we even dissent. We dissent all the time because when you put strong personalities on a floor together, people are going to have very strong opinions. So I remember there was a founder where people loved her product, but they didn't invest because they felt she would be very stubborn and not open to feedback. And they said, we don't
Yeah.
want to partner with such a person. And I, in fact, did not feel that at all. And I felt that she was very warm, very open, and that was a bit stereotypical. And so I invested. We had a
Yeah.
lot of such disconnects with names of the ventures. The same name some sharks would like, some sharks would not like. We
Yeah.
dissented on the market size and the potential. We dissented on the fact whether they needed a co-founder or could go solo. I mean, there were so many areas that we dissented on, and it was very interesting to see that because even on the role of a mentor, I remember we dissented on whether a mentor is. So we would have these philosophical conversations because when we would give a valuation, the founder would typically step out for 2 minutes to call a mentor. That should I take this valuation? Should I not take it? And then there would be people on
Yeah.
the floor saying, "What is this mentor? Why can't they decide for themselves?" Right? And I'd be like, "No, mentors have played a very big role in my life. I get it that they have to get they have to have a sounding board." And so we would always have these very philosophical discussions on
Right.
mentors, on dissent, which made it more interesting, I think, not just for us, but also for the audience.
Absolutely. I think that's what kept us glued to television and watching the show each time the episodes came out. Okay, so I'm going to take some questions now from the audience as well. And
Sure.
we'll continue with the questions that I had on my mind too in between. Please share some of the unexpected surprises, good and bad, that you had during your investor journey. That's from Ramesh Kumar. Thanks so much, Ramesh, for that question.
So the unexpected surprises, the good ones were that there were companies I was lukewarm about, but then after due diligence, some of them turned out to be winners. And that's because
Yeah.
they were very organized, very driven, very methodical. So, for example, Rare Planet, when I invested in them, they were barely at 4 airport stores, the handicrafts company. Now they're at 35
Right.
airports. The scale at which they've grown in just 6 months, I would never
Wow.
have expected that. And when you really read
Absolutely.
Rano's story, and I've covered a little bit about Rano's story in my book, that gives you insight into why he is so driven and why he went from 4 stores to 35 stores in 6 months. So those were some good surprises. The unexpected surprises were there were two or three of my investees, founders, where I was trying to help them, but they were a bit stubborn and not open to feedback at all. And so at that time, you just have to,
Right.
okay, you learn through your own
Take a call. Yeah.
experiences, and you step back because you never want to impose
Yeah.
as an investor. So at the
Right.
time, you barely get 40 minutes with a founder. So it's later when you do the due diligence and become part of their journeys that you get the real look on what a founder is. And that has a direct
And all
impact
the
on
drama.
the drama.
And
That has
all
a
the
direct impact
drama
on the
behind the scenes, right?
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what is your experience of working in a family business been? And actually, this ties in well with the question that Shilpa has asked. Thanks for your question, Shilpa. What's your family's reaction on the book? So that's an interesting question. So we'll take both if that's okay with you.
So family business is a double-edged sword. I mean, it's a blessing to have the ability to make an impact in a business which is a family business and it's your own baby. But then there are a lot of these
Hmm.
other nuances that I've written about in terms of challenges of a family business. And I've outlined that in detail in my book. I mean, one of the common
Hmm.
threads in my book is it's not just all goody goody, I've written about a
Yeah.
lot of personal struggles and,
You've
personal,
written about it as sort of like a roller coaster, right?
yeah.
So it's your highs, it's your lows, it's everything in between. When you
And there are
plateau,
many
it's
lows.
a,
And there are
it's a
many
whole,
lows.
yeah,
Many lows
absolutely.
in my journey as a
Absolutely.
family
And
business.
I remember reading in the chapter also that you said that, as an entrepreneur, you have to be really thick skinned and you're
Yeah.
always going to have more failures than successes. So that's something I
Absolutely.
think that,
Always.
yeah.
You have to really have nerves of steel, and you have to look at
Hmm.
failures as learning and focus on the learning
Hmm.
and the growth and not the hurt and the
Hmm.
guilt. Unless you have that
Yeah.
positive mindset, you are not going to survive this journey. So, I'm proud of the fact that I've written a lot about personal failures and personal,
Yeah.
um, setbacks, because I think very often people posture and just write the goody goody stuff, and they're afraid to
Yeah.
show the vulnerabilities. And that's why the vulnerable leader, that chapter is one of my favorite chapters.
Right. And that ties in well with our next question. What's your leadership style and should leaders be vulnerable?
Absolutely, they should be vulnerable because it does three things. One is it gives others the courage to be vulnerable. It creates a culture of empathy, and when people know
Hmm.
that they're not going to be judged and they can be authentic, it really creates a culture of creativity and innovation because people are not afraid to fail. They know they're not going to be punished for failing.
Yeah.
And I think that
Right.
authenticity, that empathy, that creativity is
Hmm.
again what takes the company to the next level. And
Hmm.
I think you cannot have that if you are posturing and faking it all the time. So I think
Yeah.
vulnerability
True.
more and more is an important trait.
All right. So there are two slightly technical questions from the audience. Gopal Krishnan PK, thanks for your question. How do you decide the valuation is right in early stage companies when usual methods like DCF, you may have to explain that to the rest of the audience, have no meaning?
So
And the
a lot of
second, I'm
people,
just going to, yeah.
yeah.
Or do you want to take the first and then I'll go on to the
I'll
second?
just finish the
Yeah.
first. So, the way we did
Yeah,
valuations,
sure.
a lot of companies were D2C companies. So, there were three ways we did
Hmm.
valuation. One is a lot of them were D2C companies. So, D2C companies, thumb of rule, 3 to 5 times sales is what we did,
Hmm.
depending on the gross margin. Then, second method is a lot of them had a prior round of investment. So, you never want to down
Hmm.
value. So, we would see
Yeah,
when the prior round of investment was, what month it was, and then, do a ballpark valuation. Third method was
right.
competitors. We would know a lot of
Hmm.
competitors who had got a certain valuation and we would use that as a benchmark. So these were the
Hmm.
three very back of the envelope ways of doing valuation because you're right. I mean, you can't use a DCA for a very complicated method of valuation when you have very little time to make a decision on the tank.
All right. And so the next question is Namita, please guide on what role can a CA play in an NGO like Akshaya Patra Foundation? We feed 2 million each school day across India through midday meal programs, something around internal audit. So, really quickly, if you could answer that, I think we have 5 minutes left. So, I'd like to take one or two, three more questions. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. In fact, this is a great question. So, congratulations for
Hmm.
working in the social impact sector. And I think one of the things that a CA can bring to philanthropy, to social impact, is structure. Because unless you don't run an NGO like a company, you're not going to get the scale and the systems in place. So, I think a CA can add a lot of value in terms of processes, structure, governance that can take social impact sector to the next level. And my compliments on being part of Akshay Patra that is doing such incredible work in the country.
Okay, so Dipto has asked us, did you hire external business consultants for building up the leadership pipeline and putting things like separate compensation for businesses with higher gestation time?
No, we've rarely used external consultants. I think the best learning has been from our own sixth sense, and intuition of what works and what doesn't work. Uh, and then we've pivoted, we've changed, we've tweaked. So we've actually done it on our own through our gut instinct and through the collective wisdom of the top leaders.
Right. Okay, and this is a question I'd like to ask you. Give us some examples of women who are breaking barriers from the Shark Tank episodes that left an impression on your mind.
Oh, many. And in fact, I've written a full list of them
You've given a
in
full
my
list,
chapter on
yeah.
women breaking news. There
Right.
were so many, so many, so many. The Jhaji pickle women who were rattling off MBA buzzwords, and they're from Darbhanga. I mean, they don't really have that MBA background, but they worked hard, they studied, they came so well prepared. Sanskriti, who's a CEO of the visually impaired device, with the little boy
Mm-hmm.
Prathamesh who stole my heart. Then you had so many other women who gave back. The Indian hemp company lady, who were like, did you ask me this because I'm a woman? Then the good piggy girl who got
Right.
shredded to pieces but kept a smile intact. I mean, they were just incredible women to watch, and you'll be surprised that 48% of the deals that got funded on Shark Tank either had a solo woman founder or a woman was part of the co-founding team. And I think those are
Right.
incredible numbers at Shark Tank. So I think we've really done a good job of showcasing women power.
Super. And Namita, with that last question, I'd like to say I'm out. Thanks again for joining us. I was
Thank you.
waiting
It
to
was
say that
very
throughout
enjoyable,
the session.
Amit. People say that to me all the time. Expertise Wali, I'm out Wali, and I love it. So great. Thank you
Right.
so much for
So
your
great. Thank you
time.
so
I
much for
really
joining
enjoy the
us. Yes.
conversation with
Thanks for your
Wali.
time. Super. Thanks, Subha.
Thank, thank you
Bye
so
bye.
much, Rupangi, and
Thank
thank you,
you.
Namita. Wonderful rapid fire and a great set of questions, and of course, delightful answers. And really love the insight on how many women have got funded, because
Yes,
that's
that's
such a
a
challenge
fantastic
point.
number,
So important.
48%. It's a really fantastic
Amazing,
number.
amazing. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Thanks, Rupangi. Brilliant questions, and I really had a great time.
Thanks, Amita. Thanks a ton. All right.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Subha.
Bye. And so we'll move on to our next session on how to build a prosperous India. If we could have the panelists in.
Hi, Shiva.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening.
And do we have Mr. Bhaskar also? So let me just start off in the interest of time and introduce our moderator for this session. So, who better to have a conversation around a book on steering India to wealth than someone who has spent over 3 decades in the industry, in equity research, investment management, running an institutional broking business, and more. So, please welcome a veteran of the finance world, Rajshekhar Iyer. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah,
A
thank you.
chartered accountant by qualification, he started his career in leading audit firms and has worn multiple hats. He's edited a leading stock market magazine, run a popular value investing newsletter for many years, set up the research desk, and then headed the institutional broking business at Kotak Securities. In 2008, Mr. Rajshekhar promoted Securities Investment Management Private Limited, a SEBI registered portfolio management company. He straddled various investment strategies, and he likes to buy companies where profit growth can be very high, but the current valuation is low. And I think that's something where you must let us in on some of those secrets. Because today, the valuation numbers we hear, we can't even count the zeros, or we don't even know how many they hold, right? So he, he uses technicals to optimize the entry point and capture the excess on the upside of the market. So I'll hand over to you, Mr. Rajshekhar, for a conversation today with our esteemed author, Mr. Bhaskar. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Shiva. Hi, Bhaskar. How are you?
Hi, Raj. It's good to see you on the screen.
Yes, it's been quite some time since we could meet. Um, just to introduce Bhaskar for the benefit of the audience, I've known Bhaskar for, I don't know, now, close to 35 years now. I remember as a friend, as a journalist, as an editor, as a researcher, mm, as an entrepreneur, and now as a writer of very interesting books. So I remember in the late 80s and 90s, we used to meet weekly at his office in Express Towers to discuss the next month's stories. And Bhaskar used to be bouncing around talking about various industries and ideas. Um, so Bhaskar has always been very passionate on India and very passionate on, very optimistic about India's growth opportunities, even when it was not very fashionable for journalists to be optimistic about India, you know. So his last book about growth, Game India, on the various opportunities that India has to
Game
succeed in the
India.
world, Game India, came out about 3.5 years back now, and maybe it's time to sort of review some of those
Yes.
ideas in the book. Bhaskar has written one more book recently. It's still not with us. It should be available to us very soon, I think, Bhaskar. Mm,
End October.
end October. So this is a book on one of India's
Yes.
most successful industrialists and entrepreneurs, the remarkable Mr. Gautam Adani. We don't have the book with us, but we'll discuss some of the ideas which form part of the book. But to start off with, Bhaskar, one of the subjects that you've always been very passionate about and written in your earlier book is the dairy industry in India. You know, and you had
Yes.
mentioned that India has huge advantages in the dairy industry and can be probably the leading player in the world. And I think it is already the leading player in the world, is
It
it?
is the leading player.
It is the leading player in the world. And by coincidence, I think day before yesterday, India hosted the International Dairy Conference,
I'm
where
there right now. I'm
oh,
there right now.
okay. I believe Prime Minister Modi inaugurated the event, and
Yes.
there was a lot of optimism about the growth going forward of the industry also. So, what do you think has been done well, and compared to what you thought 3 years back? Has there been progress, and you're happy with how things have shaped up? Are you optimistic about how things will happen in the future in the industry?
Well, let me clarify one thing. That
Mm.
while I'm optimistic about India, mine is a lover's quarrel with his world. I am pretty annoyed at the way governments work, and the governments distort India's potential to grow. If the dairy industry is done very well, it is in spite of the government. It was because of a visionary called Varghese Kurian, who actually made India the number one producer of milk, the lowest cost producer, the most interesting producer. And as Kurian said, I do not believe in mass production, but I believe in production by the masses. And almost 80% of the cattle owners are small time players with just one or two cattle heads, often tied in the backyard. So it's an amazing thing to harness the strength of small people and still become one of the largest players in the world. There's a second interesting thing that you must that I picked up this just today at the conference, at the dairy conference, and that is in India. You have a situation where the world is talking about the methane footprint that cattle cause. And
Yes.
today's discussions are very interesting because they find that India has the lowest cattle footprint, the methane footprint, than any other country in the world, because India does not grow food specially for cattle. Because a byproduct of rice and wheat, the stalks, are used by the cattle, and every excretion of the cattle, whether it's gobar or whether it's gas or it is urine, is harnessed into the ecosystem once again. And right now, the dairy industry is very bullish on CNG as well as biogas for cooking.
Okay. Now, I remember you mentioning that because Indians eat a lot of rice and wheat, and the byproduct becomes the cattle feed, India has a huge advantage in
Yes.
that.
And I remember asking Korean, what about China? China eats rice. And Korean laughed and he said, that is where God has been kind to us. The Chinese don't digest milk, and so they will not produce so much of milk.
Right.
While India, it's a staple diet right from the time a child is born till that time a person dies, you have either ghee or you have butter or you have one of the dairy products being used in the ceremonies relating to birth and death, besides consuming milk and yogurt and everything else besides.
Also increasing. But on one of the topics you touched upon in answer to the first question, you talked about government's contribution to growth. And I think even in the introduction to your book last time, you had mentioned that very often India grows despite governance rather than
Yes.
because of government. But in the last few years, ease of doing business has become one of the big mantras for all economic advisors and for governments. Do you see
Yes.
significant changes taking place since 1931 in 1991? I'm sorry, in India, and more so in the last few years.
Yes, there have been changes. There have been changes in the sense that you can see the types of cars that are coming, the mobile phones. You don't have queues for phones. I remember when my father was alive, we had a waiting list of 15 to 20 years. And my father worked in the telephone, so we had a free telephone at home. And there'd always be a queue of neighbors outside the house saying, "Can we use your phone?" Or we'd get a phone call, "Aap padosi ko bula lenge." Now, that was the kind of India that we grew up in. And today, nobody waits for a phone.
Right.
And so there has been some changes. But at the same time, there have been some regressions also. The purchasing power of the farmer has gone down. The GDP growth rate, which was very remarkable in the 1990s and in the early 2000s, has started slowing down. And there could be various factors, but that is unfortunate. The quality of education at school levels is declining. And for me, that's worrisome because the future generation will need workers who are educated. So there have been good things, there have been not so good things, but I'm still hopeful because people like Azim Premji have come into education, are looking after schools. A person like Adani, through his foundation, has started picking up government schools and has started transforming government schools.
Right. So you think more can be done, but things are improving.
Things are improving, and I think that things will improve in spite of the government. Industry has found a way not to depend too much on the government. And what is again worrisome is that if you look at the last 2-3 years, the government's ability to garner taxes has been increasing by 15%, 20%, 30%, while your GDP has been growing at 5%, 6%. So obviously, the country has not been earning as much as the government has been.
This increase. So on the question of India growing despite government, there are certain areas where growth is not possible or direction of growth is not possible without the right government policies in place. And one of the
Very true.
areas where you talked about at length in your book is the solar power and what Germany
Yes.
has done in terms of adoption of solar power.
Oh, brilliant.
Um,
Yes.
so have there been any changes in the last 3 or 4 years which make you optimistic about this?
Yes. I must tell you a small story that happened. About 4 years ago, I'd gone to Tripura. And when I'd gone to Tripura, I met the Chief Minister, Biplab Kumar Dev, who's not the Chief Minister now. And he was telling me how just before the 2018 elections, he was told by Modi that, every house must be connected to electricity, must be given electricity. And Biplab Kumar Dev got a survey done to find out whether he could connect all the houses. And then he found that 50,000 houses could not be connected for at least 3 more years. So he asked the engineers why. He said, because in the hills, to take the wires up to the hills will take some time. And he said, but I need to get them electrified before elections. And he said, no, sir, we can't do it. There's only one solution, that is solar. And when he looked at the government papers, he found that there was no budget for solar. So he went to Delhi, met the Union Power Minister, R.K. Singh, and said, I need solar for 50,000 houses. And R.K. Singh said, sorry, there's budget only for grid power, not for solar power. And so Biplab got upset. He said, listen, you don't have to fight elections, I have to fight elections. I need solar power. He said, sorry,
Best
there's no budget.
motivator for politicians.
What's that?
The best motivator for politicians. The
Yes,
need to win election.
absolutely. So,
Yeah.
so what happened is, he said, okay, what if the state pays for it? So I'm guessing if the state is paying for it, I have no objections. And he said, but give me an affidavit that the state will pay. So he asked his chief secretary while he was sitting there to send an affidavit immediately. And an undertaking was given to the state, to the central government, that the state would pay. And he went back and ordered solar power to be given, rooftop solar, for all the 50,000 houses.
Okay.
Wonder of wonders, instead of waiting for 5 years, solar power was available to the villagers, the hilly tribes, in just about 6 months' time. Second wonder, while a grid power would have cost each household 5 lakhs of rupees, solar power cost him just 50,000 rupees.
Okay.
And the biggest surprise was that the villagers are thrilled with solar because it's more reliable than the linesmen who would bring the electricity to the house. It would get snapped, there'd be shutdowns, there'd be interruptions in power supply. Solar was reliable, and a bakelite battery, so that the power could be stored and used at night. It did wonderful. As a result, the whole of the Northeast started clamoring for solar, and now the government has no choice but to allow every state in the Northeast to have solar. So again, in spite of the government, solar has succeeded.
So that's very interesting, because this is what you call as rooftop solar, and you have recommended that as the best way for India to go, given the number of households India has, the number of houses India has. So is that something
Yes.
which other states have adopted?
Well, not so much. It's been adopted in small places here and there. Punjab has been very good, but Northeast is doing so well that now almost every private sector player, including the Adanis, are setting up a distribution network for solar in Northeast India.
Okay.
And Northeast India will change the dynamics of the whole of India, because once solar comes, the beauty is that you don't have any monthly bills, any 6 monthly bills. And because there are no bills, there are no monthly subsidies, and the politicians' power to play the subsidy game gets diminished automatically.
Okay.
It'll happen.
India has a target of 100 GB of solar power. So how much have we progressed towards that target?
Most of the solar power units that I have put up in India are really solar farms, which I'm not happy about, because that is a kind of a land grab that takes place.
Okay.
In rooftop solar, you don't need land. Every household can just put up a pole, even if the house is a thatched roof. You put up a pole and put up a solar panel right at the top, and there is power.
Lovely.
That is why, you see, Germany discovered, and this is something very interesting. At that time, the German minister was a person, Hermann Scheer,
Sure.
was an electrical engineer, and he discovered that by 2008, he started in 2000, by 2008 he discovered that Germany had more people employed in the solar sector than in the automobile sector. And my contention in 2010 was that India has more sunlight than Germany. India has more people, hence more houses. Rooftop solar is a given for India. It can create about 80 million jobs within 2 years' time. So while we have unemployment, we could solve the unemployment problem by just going for rooftop solar. And the government has not done that yet, except under pressure.
Yes, that was one of the very interesting chapters in your book, the one on solar. But the other thing you had written about was India's water capabilities. And
Yes.
I think you were one of the early admirers of Adani for setting up the ports all across the country. And in retrospect, he seems to have hit the jackpot with the ports. I mean, that seems to be one of the big drivers for the Adani business machine.
His mainstay is a port. It's a port that got him into coal trading.
Yeah. So, do you see that that is going to be something which is going to be increasingly, promoted by other states, the southern states particularly, the southern and eastern states?
Look, when you talk of water, there are two parts. One is water by the seashore, which is where ports and coastal shipping comes in.
Right.
And there's no one to beat Adani. Adani already owns more than 12 ports, and the number's increasing. He has bid for at least 4 more ports in India. He also has a port in Australia. He has a port in Colombo and a port in Israel in Haifa.
Right.
And he's growing both globally as well as in India. So as far as ports are concerned, coastal shipping is concerned, Adani will remain the uncrowned king. So while there's competition, he is the king. Point
And all
one.
this started with Mundra.
All started with Mundra, and today Mundra is perhaps the largest port in India.
Okay.
And he had the vision to buy lots of land around Mundra. So today he's locating companies. He's got Adani Wilmar there. He's got a UMPP power plant there. He's getting steel there, aluminium there, and a lot of other kinds of plants coming up at Mundra, including Maruti, its export hub. Mundra is amazing. What it's doing for India is just incredible.
So your
The
book
other part
obviously
of water, I must mention the other part of water. India is blessed because in terms of water, as a percentage of land mass, India has more water than Bangladesh, than Pakistan, and definitely more than China. India has water, but India abuses water. It destroys water. That's another story.
So you already touched upon the subject of education and the quality of the manpower, because one of the hot subjects whenever we talk about India and what seems to get a lot of traction with global investors and investors is demographics.
Yes.
So over the next 20 years, India will have the largest young workforce in the world. But that's not of much use unless the workforce is well trained and educated and also motivated.
Yes.
So in recent times, we have seen a lot of discussions about unemployment and also unemployability of the labor
Yes.
force. So
Yes.
do you think enough is being done in that area for the next 20 years in terms of
Well,
improving quality?
if you look at the Lok Sabha replies by the government, so this is not my statistics, it is what was stated by the government before the Lok Sabha. Unemployment for people who are not educated beyond the 6th standard is just about 2 to 3%. Unemployment for students who pass the 10th standard is almost about 50%. Unemployment for the graduates is almost as high as 80%. Now, what does that tell you? It just tells you that the man who's done his graduation is unemployable. You want a secretary, you advertise for a secretary, you get 100 applications, you'll be lucky if you get one. If you ask lawyers, they'll tell you that only 1% of the applications they get is employable. If you ask TCS and McKinsey, they'll say 20% is employable. Now, obviously, that is dangerous because the boy or girl has sat through 12 years of schooling, 5 years of college, and then becomes unemployable. The child has lost its 17 years of productivity and has become unproductive. That needs to change.
I remember one of the things you had mentioned in the book was the quality of high school education and the school education, which makes the people who enter college better qualified to learn from the colleges.
Yes.
And you had said one of the hurdles was that education was for some reason treated as a state subject, and because of which the government could not enact laws promoting education, particularly fiscal incentives or tax incentives, those kind of things.
Yes.
So the solution obviously lies in more private sector involvement in primary education and secondary education. Is that happening in any serious scale at all?
Yes, it is. Firstly, let me clarify. If the center wants, it can influence education dramatically, even though it's a state subject. Because one, it's on the concurrent list. Two, all grants and income tax benefits are given by the center. So it could bring in a system of evaluating schools and teachers and students. And wherever output is measured, the output measured is not satisfactory, the school could be denied the schools or the individuals could be denied those tax benefits. And if this poor output continues for 3 years, or the school management should be taken away and given to a management that has handled output much better, outcomes much better. Now, that's one part. The second part is, yes, it's changing. Almost every big industrialist has set up his own educational campuses. Second, industrial players like Azim Premji have started working with the governments, state governments across, to tell them how to improve education at the school level without changing the teachers. This is what Adani is also doing now. In almost every state, including the backward states, he tells the government which are the schools that you want us to take over. They don't just change the teacher, they just start measuring outcomes and give a report to the government, and the government machinery automatically is compelled to bring in a financial discipline with the teachers and even with the management. That management control, without any fund without any fund injection, is changing education, though in very small pockets. And the best proof of that is parents of students who go to private schools are now coming to Azim Premji or to Adani and saying, please enroll us in your schools, which is a government-owned school. That is good. But it's still very small. The government has to use those techniques for all its schools across India.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that will clearly make a huge difference to the ability to benefit from the demographic dividend for India.
Exactly. A bad output school student is going to be a bad input for colleges, and no amount of good college education 5 years can change the rot that 11 years of bad school education has caused.
Yeah. Coming to the business front, you had mentioned in your book, one of the chapters you had mentioned was about the ability to enforce contracts or get your disputes resolved, and also the judicial system, the way the whole thing works. Now, in some areas, we have definitely seen improvement in the last few years because of the business courts, the tribunals, and matters being moved for expeditious disposal. Do you think enough has been done as an incentive to business in that area?
Yes and no. As ORF last year brought out a monograph where they showed that India has about 6,000 compliances for industrialists, of which about 1,600 are compliances that invite a jail term. Now, the fact is that not many industrialists have gone to jail, which means that they've arrived at settlements outside the system. So those laws have existed only to increase the bribe quota, the bribe quotient, and industrialists have learned to thrive in spite of the government. So there is no contract enforcement. There's very poor contract enforcement. The government has abrogated all the international arbitration cases, and the Devas is the latest one where the government and Devas are fighting, and Devas has won 2 rounds, and now it started freezing attaching government properties overseas. It is unfortunate because today, because of this unwillingness on the part of the government to respect international arbitration awards, very few countries are bringing in money into India's FDI. You're getting FPI. You're getting money as portfolio investments, but not FDI. FDI is declining. And the little FDI that comes in either through Netherlands, which still has a BIT with India, because it has still some time to be to lapse, to have an expiry date, or through Singapore, which also has a BIT. The government tried pressuring both countries to cancel the old BIT, bilateral investment treaty, and to see if they sign a new one, which is not very favorable for arbitration. And both those countries have refused. So an IKEA, which is a Swedish company, comes through Netherlands to make investments in India because they are protected by an international law.
So obviously the FBI, the institutional investing comes, FPI comes with better regulatory provisions because of SEBI
Obviously,
and
why would you bring in your money in a country where there's a risk? So you bring in money which you can take out overnight, which is what portfolio investors do. But foreign direct investments have declined.
Bhaskar, one question from the audience. What is your experience of the, your transition from being a journalist to being an author of books? How does that work for you?
Well, I'm still a journalist. I'm still a researcher, and I'm still a writer. So I happily, it's not transition, it's just that they coexist. Maybe I was not ready to write a book 10 years ago.
Okay.
And it's just that you have accumulated so much of information one very fine day, either by accident or by design, you say, okay, I'm going to write a book.
Do you have time for one more question, Shubha?
Just a really quick one.
Okay. One last question is a very interesting question. I can ask the question quickly, Bhaskar. Take your time to answer it. Adani seems to have seized opportunities. This is a question from the audience. Seems to have seized opportunities that other industrialists did not. What is his secret sauce?
Well, any industries that has to survive in India has to be friendly with politicians. Ambani showed this. Every other industry showed this. Adani has been able to has been able to bridge relationships with every political party across the spectrum, not just one political party. He talks to Mamata Banerjee, he talks to the BJP, he talks to Congress, and he gets his work done. He's a good negotiator. He's a good relationship builder.
Thank you, Bhaskar. Thank you, Shubha.
Thank you, Raj. It's good.
Lovely.
Thank you so much. And I think we look forward to a lot more in
Yes, so am I.
also. And love the perspectives on so many industries, from dairy to solar to the education and the state of education in India. Wonderful perspectives. Thank you, Rajshekhar, for anchoring this, and thank you, Mr. Bhaskar, for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Only one thing I'd like to clarify. Ignore whatever Raj said at the beginning. If I have to start believing him, I won't believe it's me. Okay. Thank you, Raj. It's wonderful talking to you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. Bangalore Literary Festival. It's good to be with you.
We are honored. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Another really engaging session in deep into the various industries in India, and really where can we grow? What's happening in the stories of solar, the stories of dairy, quite a perspective. And now we're going to move on to another exciting session.
A very good evening, Subha. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, Marak. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. A very engaging session. I was following the last 15 to 20 minutes of that session.
Wonderful. Okay, so we'll deep dive right into yours.
Sure. You want a break, Subha? You have been
No.
you have been connected.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. I'm rearing to go, Marak. So, yeah. So, we all worry about getting unknowingly caught by a scamster's SMS, or falling prey to a link via email from what's really not our bank. And as an ex-banker, I go crazy reminding friends and family to, set smart passwords, strong passwords. Don't click on everything you get. Don't share your card details, etc. Because every fraud hits hard, right? No matter what the amount, you feel like you've been deceived. You feel like you've been conned of your savings and your wealth, and it is a betrayal. So while we focus on these small things, we as citizens and taxpayers have been conned many times over by some really serious frauds, and someone will tell us what serious really means, right? So in a first of its kind book, The Great Indian Fraud reveals how Many serious frauds result from manipulation of complex financial transactions involving simple maths and tricks, but it deceives regulators, enforcers, businesses, customers. So, warm welcome to you, Smarak, author, policy analyst, tax diplomat, and the revealer of secrets that fraudsters have been perpetrating time and again. Smarak has been in government service across several roles in income tax as Joint Commissioner, in foreign tax as Deputy Secretary, Pricing Agreements, and is currently Director of Administration in the Department of Revenue. He writes in leading publications on geoeconomics, economic warfare, taxation, cross border transactions. So, thank you so much for giving us your time this evening.
Engaging discussion here on the Bangalore Business Lit Fest.
Great. So, let me begin. Um, you have clearly seen the dark underbelly of the world of finance and business. When did you realize that there is a book here?
Bangalore. Back when I was working in the investigation wing in Bangalore, at that time, I used to come across very interesting modus operandi, and at the same time, when I used to interact with people, all kinds of people, there may be subjects, there may be people who have abetted laundering activities, or there may be people who have seen these things happen on the sidelines, or there may be victims also. I found that there are some stories there. And also importantly, what I saw is that these are stories. I mean, the modus operandi that I saw at that point of time, they're very similar to the modus operandi which I had read about in reports that date back to 1960s, 1970s. Then I thought that there is a pattern here. What used to happen 50 years back, that's still happening now, even though the nature has changed, even though the regulation has become much more complex, even though technology has been brought in to regulate the financial world, the kind of offenses that are still happening are very similar to the offenses that were happening earlier.
Right, right. And I think that's something that you reiterate often in the book that uh, there is a pattern, and it's getting more complex, but the pattern still exists, and there are similar patterns, and that's what you're highlighting. In thinking of sharing these stories, what was your biggest challenge? And I must ask, at any time, did you fear the consequences of some of the stories and the names that you were going to bring out?
Well. The biggest challenge in while writing the book was in the writing itself, because financial frauds are quite complex. They're very different. I mean, they're very different from normal frauds, from normal criminal activities. They are pretty complex, and explaining them to a layman would be very difficult. So that was the first challenge that I faced. And generally, when I talk with regulators, when I talk with personnel from RBI or SEBI, or some investigators from income tax department or enforcement directorate, we all talk in a very we all talk in a language that is laden with a lot of jargon. So that had to be simplified for people, so that and I needed to have a voice behind the narrative. Otherwise, anyone who is a normal graduate or normal MBA student, he won't be able to accept the book. Okay, he will not find it very enthusing. So that was the main challenge that I faced while writing the book. And the second challenge, as you said, when writing about huge frauds, big frauds, you have to be very careful about what you are writing, because a writer is always liable to suits, defamation suit, or any other kind of lawsuit. So the writer has to be very, very careful about how he is writing the book. So there are many of the cases which I have discussed in the book, which are ongoing cases where the conviction has still not happened. There's a
Correct.
possibility also that those allegations may be proved to be wrong. So my role was to narrate them in a way that I'm not leaving any kind of loose allegation of my own. I just mention what are the allegations made by this agency or that agency, or by the court, or what the court is looking into, what matter is subjudice in court, and then I go into a general narrative. So that was the second challenge that I faced in writing the book.
Sure. And I think you chose a very storytelling kind of narrative style, because in each chapter, before really jumping into the fraud, you are able to set the context, explain to us how that industry or how that whole space works, whether it's export import or taxation or startups, and then lead into what some of the serious frauds that have happened. um, keeping in mind the theme of our lit fest this year, which is really around startups, I'm going to jump to one of your later chapters. Can I, as a retail investor, really trust startup valuations today? What's going on? Is it a long con, or is it based on something?
That's an interesting question, Subha, and that's a question that many people are asking. Many investors are also asking this question, and there's been a lot of debate on this question. What my view is that, okay, the startup industry per se, it's quite neat and clean, but because of the nature of valuations, because it is so difficult to value startups, there are some fraudsters which have also come on board. So
Mm.
forms of valuation that we're using that cannot be used for valuing startups. There are three traditional methods that are generally used in actual science. One was cost method, one was the market method, and the third one was the income method. Under the income method, there's a methodology called the DCF, discounted cash flow, which is generally used. Okay, but those are methods which were developed some 30 years back by actual science. The startups that we see today, they are developing over the digital economy. So the traditional economy relied on business models, which we generally call the pipeline business models. Whereas the digital economy relies on new kinds of business models, which are the platform business models, where the growth happens exponentially. So there are some new metrics, okay, which have been developed, and luckily, most of the professional investors have technically sound employees or technically sound professionals who give them the right kind of advice. They use the right kind of metrics to judge whether a company is going to succeed or not. Now, second, I mean, having said that, the risk involved is significant. So, a genuine company that you see on today's date, maybe tomorrow it will succeed, maybe tomorrow it will fail. But it does not mean that it is a fraudulent company.
Fair.
A fraudulent company will always try to color itself as a startup, but it is not a startup. That's my small point here.
No, I think that's a very well said and a fair articulation of what we are seeing, right? Um, and you bring it out in your book, in how, let's say, the case of Satyam, there is an intent to fraud, and so that at some point catches up with the founder and the company, right? Many
Yeah.
of the serious frauds that you have highlighted, the numbers are so huge, and there is a huge element of lack of oversight, right? And so when I read about, let's say, even Nirav Modi and the PNB fraud, as a banker, I'm thinking there are numerous controls, so many checks and balances and processes. Is are people internally to be blamed? Auditors are to be blamed, or is it just designed to fail, that we don't have enough checks to catch this?
Suhab, the thing is that on today's date, the financial world has evolved in such a major way that the world of finance itself has become a complex system. It is no longer a simple system. It's a complex system, and the entire complex system is not under the control of a single regulator. So in the complex system, there are many subsystems. Each system is under the control of a regulator, and there's another problem, that is cross-border problem. So within one country, there may be one set of regulators. In the other country, there are another set of regulators. So you can, if I can use that analogy, so the financial market is just like an elephant. Okay. So every regulator is good in the sense that every regulator is regulating some part of it, some part of the elephant. Someone is regulating the tail, someone is regulating the trunk, but no one knows how big the elephant is. No one knows how the elephant completely operates. So that is where these companies, they misuse the system. They create a large number of companies. Generally, what they do is they do not rely on a single company or two companies or three companies. They create a plethora of cell companies. These cell companies, some of them operate in offshore finance centers, some of them operate in India, US, and then they do the business in such a way that they try to make use of the loopholes in the system. and those are the blind corners where the elephant is not monitored. So there are 10 regulators monitoring the elephant from different angles, but there's still blind corners. So the blind corners are the ones which the fraudsters try to attack. I mean, if I were a fraudster, theoretically speaking, that is what I will try to do. I will try to understand a complex system, and then I'll find out where do the blind spots lie. What has happened over the last 20-30 years is law has generally managed to catch up with the evolution of finance. So what happens is, on a very dynamic basis, law is trying to identify which are the blind spots, and then they are trying to plug it. Unfortunately, the pace of financial innovation, that is, the fintech innovation, is so high that new blind spots keep coming up. So there's always opportunity for fraudsters to harness this kind of blind spots. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's
what I think. Uh,
No, I think it makes sense because I was going to ask you that as an ecosystem, you have investors, regulators, you have various financial intermediaries who now have access to so much data and so many tools like AI. So I'm sure, from even the your side, you must be using so much of data, or you must be seeing such volumes of data, but we are not able to crack the code of these fraudsters early enough. Like you said, it's reactive, then you plug that loophole and then the next one is uncovered somewhere, right? So what we really need is more financial tech innovation.
yes, we also need more financial tech innovation, and also we need that attitude of being proactive whenever a new innovation is happening. So if you look at the FATF document, FATF literature, FATF is Financial Action Task Force on money laundering and terror financing. It is a watchdog. It is an international watchdog on money laundering. So FATF has always stressed that whenever you are coming out with any kind of a new financial product, what you do is you first set up a regulatory sandbox. So you try that product within the regulatory sandbox, and when you're trying that product, you also look at the AML CFT controls, that is anti-money laundering and counter terror financing controls, which basically include the fraud controls also. How much, to what extent that area is prone to fraud. So that is how it should happen generally. But the pace of innovation is so high that many times the governments miss out on that. I mean, there is a way out. There is a way out, but a government has to be really diligent to do that. And yes, technology always helps. RegTech. I strongly believe that regulatory technology, public-private partnership in devising controls, that is always very, very beneficial. Government and the private sector have to work together, because the government simply does not have the wherewithal. It simply does not have the expertise to develop regulatory technologies. RegTech can only be developed by geeks, okay, who you find in the private sector only.
Yeah, no, that's a nice new term, RegTech, because you're right. The geeks are focused on the actual products and the actual technology innovation, but you know um, we needed to work in parallel with the regulatory framework that's coming up, right? And we tend to, when we don't know what's happening, we tend to ban it, or create restrictions or barriers, right? Today crypto and the whole digital currency, if we don't know what's happening, we say okay, it's banned, don't venture into it, but it's thriving on its own, right? So do you see a huge danger lurking there?
Yes, definitely, definitely. Cryptocurrency is a major area of danger. I will tell you what is happening now with the Ponzi schemes. So Ponzi schemes, if you remember, in my book, I have referred to a Ponzi scheme that was there in a book of R.K. Narayan, the financial expert. Okay, so R.K. Narayan, in a very beautiful way, he has explained how a Ponzi scheme used to work in that time. So nowadays, Ponzi schemes have become much more complex, but the government has also started caught up with a lot of Ponzi schemes. And a lot of bursts happened in that in the last 1 decade. But nowadays, what is happening is Ponzi schemes have also metamorphosized in such a way that now they are all based outside the country. Their base is outside the country. They are selling cryptocurrencies. In the name of cryptocurrencies, they are selling fake tokens. So they are actually not cryptocurrencies. They're coming out with ICOs, initial coin offerings. Now SEBI has said that there are only two ways you can raise money from public. One is through the IPO route, initial public offering, and second is through the CIS route, collective investment scheme route. Now these ICOs, they are never registered with SEBI, and still they are raising money from the public. So they are unregistered entities. They are doing illegal activities. I mean, frankly speaking, they are completely doing illegal activities. And many of the ICOs, they are making claims to the gullible investors, saying that we'll give you a return of 5% per month. We'll give you, I mean, you'll get a return of 10% per month. They're making this kind of promises and raising money from the people. You can never trust anyone with your money unless that person is regulated by the government. Now under now these people, they claim that they're cryptocurrencies, but they're actually not cryptocurrencies. They're coming out with some kind of arbitrary tokens, and they're selling it to the people, saying that this currency, my currency, let's say XYG currency, it is similar to Bitcoin. So people also start thinking that, okay, it may be a decentralized system, it may be totally decentralized system, and they start putting their money here. And many people have been fooled by this kind of scams. In my book, I have actually discussed the story of so-called crypto Ponzi king, Amit Bharadwaj. So there are cases against him. There are many cases against him. What he did is that initially he started raising money from people, saying that he will buy bitcoins for them. So he actually bought bitcoins, but he never gave it to the investors. Why? Because he had promised a return of 10% per month. Now that is not possible for him to do. So later, when the investor said that you please give us our money back, he said, okay, fine, I'll not give you Bitcoin, I'll give you ICAP. It's a new currency that he had developed. So ICAP, they were backing for ICAP. Okay. And after one more year, he simply vanished from India. He went to Dubai, and ultimately a lot of LEA activity happened, law enforcement investigation happened, but they never found the trail of the money. So all of that money that investors had put into this ISCP, all of that went down the drain. It was pretty unfortunate. And a lot of such scams are happening in today's date. They will approach you through Telegram groups, through Facebook, through social network, anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's on us to be really vigilant, and I like what you said, that follow the regulation. Where there's regulation, then you have a little more safety and surety, right? I think one of the interesting things about the book was, like, when we all think of Indian financial system and fraud, Harshad Mehta comes to mind, and you actually mentioned that you were tempted to exclude Harshad Mehta's story. Why is that?
Well, because I was tempted to exclude it, because what Hasid Mehta did was actually pretty simple. It was a very it was a loan against share scam, LAS we call that in technical terms, and that kind of scam is something that has been happening for a long time before Hasid Mehta. So Hasid Mehta scam was a huge scam, unlike the other ones, but it was a very simple scam. It was a huge scam, but because of the magnitude and because of the victims that it created in 1990s, that has got imprinted in our head. But if you look at the modus operandi, it was a very simple modus operandi. And before him, even Haridas Mundra in 1950s had done the same scam. And because of Haridas Mundra in 1950s, the entire Calcutta Stock Exchange had shut down. I mean, the entire Calcutta Stock Exchange had crashed because of the scam of Haridas Mundra. And it's a very simple pump and dump scheme. So because of that, I said I'm tempted not to even discuss that scam.
Yeah, but I'm glad you did, because I think for all of us, when we read about scams, we need to hear that story. And like you said, it's in a way shocking, the simplicity of it,
Yeah.
because it feels like it must have been so complex if he conned so many people for so long. Right? Is there anything in your research while you were putting all of this together, and you've touched upon so many different kind of serious frauds, that really came as a surprise to you?
Well, if I can, if you can name any one, any one scam that came as a surprise to me, I would say that while I was researching about securities frauds, I came to know that insider trading is actually pretty insipid. I mean, the insider trading is actually pretty rampant. Okay, and it's
Okay.
very and when I looked into the nitty gritties of how you are booking a case against insider trading, So there's a concept called price sensitive information, PSI. It's a technical term. So what SEBI tries to do is that SEBI tries to prove in a court of law that there is a price sensitive information, PSI, which has been leaked out. And if you look at the language of the law, anything can be called a PSI. So let's say you are connected to a company, and over snacks and coffee, you just tell me that something is happening in your company. I get to know I'm not related to the company. Now tomorrow I go and invest in that company. Okay, so I can also be accused of price sensitive information. More importantly, in Bombay, Dalal Street, near that area, in that area itself, there are many small groups that keep chattering with each other. So there's something called HOS, hard on street. So HO is a very important piece of intel which you always use. It keeps you grounded. You get to know what is happening in which company, which company is performing well, which company has internal issues. So HOS can also be termed as PSI. So HOS, hard on street, can also be termed as a price sensitive information, and you can also be accused of insider trading. In fact, there are a couple of people whom SEBI accused of insider trading. Why? Because they were part of a WhatsApp group, and in the WhatsApp group, some arbitrary person said that look, the shares of XYG company are going to go up because that company has got this license. Okay, so based on that input, I, as a WhatsApp group member, I am investing in a company, and I have also been booked by SEBI. I have been penalized by SEBI. So that actually came as a kind of I mean, I got frightened when I read it. As a government servant, coming up with a lot of stuff, and that's the reason why I'm not allowed to, trade on the stock market. But as a private
Right.
citizen, if I'm coming across something innocently and I'm using it to my
Yeah.
advantage, that can victimize me. The that
Right.
spooked me actually.
Yeah, no, interesting. That's scary. Like we're trying to see how do we catch the big guys, but the small guys like us can get caught easily because of an inadvertent conversation or a message here or there, right? It's always hard on the small guys, I think. End of the day. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. So they say, Smarak, you must be very courageous to write such a book, given that you're a government employee. So, how much of your book is about complicity of government officials in frauds?
Subha, that I have kept it for another book. Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
So bribery, so kickbacks, bribery, and corruption. Those are serious ills. Okay, and they marry not only our society, they marry every society. Okay, so and that is an ill which is actually affecting our financial system in a big way. There's no doubt about it. But that was not the focus of this book.
correct.
uh, and in fact, I was surprised to see that many times government servants are not even aware of this kind of frauds. Many times government servants are also not aware of this kind of frauds. I mean, you leave Ponzi schemes, okay, because Ponzi schemes are some things which you may get to know before even the Ponzi scheme gets busted, but you do not have any means of catching it probably. But if you look at the securities frauds, if you look at accounting frauds, you see that government servants are actually found gaping because they don't really realize. And I'll give the example of Nirav Modi fraud. The fraud was of such a huge magnitude, but the bank manager in I think that was Parel branch of Mumbai. Someone may correct me. The bank manager in that branch, he was accused of corruption, and there was a CBI investigation. So the CBI booked a disproportionate asset case against him. The disproportionate case was of an amount of only 1.5 crores or 2 crores. I don't remember the exact figures, around
That's
that
what you
number.
mentioned. Yeah.
Whereas the fraud was of the magnitude of 4,000 crores, 5,000 crores, which means that this bank manager, he never realized how big a fraud he was perpetuating. He was probably involved in facilitating one small transaction or facilitating one small activity. Okay, but
Correct.
he did not know that the fraud runs so deep.
Yeah, yeah. In the interest of his work, his client, he did something which he didn't realize the size and scale of.
Yes. At the same time, I'm not saying that government servants are holy or anything. Okay, but
No,
but
we'll
the
wait for your next book to know more.
Sure.
Yeah. So, one more question from the audience. So, these Ponzi schemes and all of these, which so many get trapped in so easily, isn't the greedy investor also responsible? How do you believe that you will get 10% return, 20% return per month on such kind of on your money?
Yeah, that is true. That is true that the greedy investor is also responsible, but we also need to understand who are these greedy investors. Some good degree of analysis has happened on this. So, who are these investors? They are usually young, young unemployed people, okay, who
Okay.
are quite aspirational, but they don't find a way out. Okay, so they want to get rich quick. So they are always in the lookout for some avenue for getting rich quick. Okay, so it's not that they're greedy, they are just dreaming. I mean, they're dreaming well. I
Mm,
mean, they
mm,
have a dream. Okay, and they don't have a they probably, many of them do not have a way of achieving their dream. So those who have a way of achieving their dream, those who are well educated, those who have got the right education, those who have a job, so they have a way of achieving their dream. But those who do not have a way of achieving their dream, they try to look out for this kind of avenues. So when they see that, yeah, this kind of avenue is possible, even if somewhere in their heart they feel that, yeah, this does not sound right. Okay, they want to believe in this, and so they invest in this kind of schemes.
makes sense. Yeah. So while I'm going to share and recommend this to a lot of my, especially banker friends, what's the one book that you gift or recommend a lot?
Well, the one, no, that's a pretty difficult
Difficult one. Do
one. Which book to name? Mm,
you have a favorite that you reread maybe because you like it so much?
uh, you can I go towards fictions also? Because
Yes, yes, definitely.
I love the books of John Grisham, and in fact, what I have recently started doing, I have read almost all the books of John Grisham. I've started doing a second round of reading, so I'm again purchasing the books of John Grisham, which I had read some 5 years, 6 years back, and I've started reading them back again. So you can say not a
Oh,
single book, but the genre of John Grisham. I love that in fiction.
that's an exciting genre. That much excitement and raciness is there even in the great Indian fraud. Thank you so much, Smarak, for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for your time and
Same yes,
sharing.
Subha, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
I
you.
had a good time here. Bye, all.
Thank you so much. Bye. So we will move on to our last and final session for today. Um, from high flyers to fallen angels. You can kindly let in both the speaker and the moderator. Thank you. Hi, Nandini. Hi, Raghuveer.
Hello, Shubha.
So, good evening. So, many of you will agree with me that it takes a certain level of intelligence and depth of knowledge to just read through an entire article in The Economist magazine. So, our next session host has not only read several, but he has published three of his own. A warm welcome to Raghuveer Srinivasan, the editor of Business Line from the Hindu Group. He's a chartered accountant and cost accountant with over 28 years of experience in journalism, all of them with the Hindu Group. He was business editor of the Hindu before he took over as editor of Business Line. He's an avid watcher of the economy and tracks automobiles and energy sector, among others, very closely. He's written several editorials over the years on the economy, markets, banking, and apart from analytical articles in the Business Line and the Hindu. He began his career in journalism in 1993 when the paper was launched as a research analyst. He is awarded the Sheving Scholarship for Young Journalists by the British government's Foreign and Commonwealth Office in 2000, and he spent a semester studying journalism at the University of Westminster in London. As a part of the scholarship, he also interned at The Economist in London. Raghuveer is a fellow of the Foreign Press Center, Tokyo, Japan, and we welcome him this evening for an exciting session with Nandini Vijayaraghavan. Over to you, Raghuveer.
Thank you, Subha. Thank you for that kind introduction. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for this invitation to be here at the Bangalore Business Lit Fest. It's a pleasure, and especially because I have a most interesting person to chat with over the next half an hour, and a very well-researched, excellent book. Nandini Vijayaraghavan, the author of Unfinished Business. Nandini is, for a formal introduction, Nandini is a corporate finance professional with extensive experience in researching Asia Pacific corporates. Her writings, columns, case studies, and books focus on the Asian business landscape, and her translation of Tamil works of literature into English. Her maiden corporate biography was called The Singapore Blue Chips, and her debut publication is an English translation of the well-known Tamil writer Kalki Krishnamurthy's classic Sivagami in Sabadam. This is a 4-volume novel, and the book and Kindle versions are available on Amazon and Flipkart. Nandini's translations of Kalki's sequel to Sivagami in Sabadam, Parthivan Kanavu, was published in 2020. I have read her books, both the maiden English one, Corporate Biography, Singapore Blue Chips, as well as her Tamil translations. They're excellent, and she's done as much as one can do justice to Kalki, who's a great. It's not possible to match him, but she's done justice to the translation of his books. Nandini is born and raised in Chennai. She holds postgraduate degree in economics from Tufts University, and is a finance graduate from the London Business School, and is also a CFA charter holder. That's for a formal introduction. I've known Nandini for the last 5-6 years. She is the quintessential Chennai Vasi, Mailapurian conservative heart of Chennai. I may, with due respect, call her as Mailapur, describe her as Mailapur Mami too. She loves her filter coffee, and though she lives in Singapore, her heart is in Chennai, and she doesn't miss a chance to go to the well-known, for those in Bangalore, the equivalent of your MTR and CTR, which is Karpagambal Mess in Chennai's Mailapur. She loves her visits there every morning for breakfast whenever she's in Chennai. And she's a regular. If you want to meet her, the best time to do that would be the December music season in Chennai, when you'll run into her on one of those sabas, sitting and listening or losing herself to the music coming out of the stage. So, Nandini, welcome.
Thank you,
And
Raghuveer.
let me first start by congratulating you on an excellent, well-researched book. A book that would make a journalist proud, and a book that I would probably recommend to my colleagues to read when it is out very soon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So let me start. Your book chronicles 4 high-flying businessmen, starting with Vijay Mallya, Naresh Goyal, Anil Ambani, and the late V.G. Siddhartha. They were all high-flying once upon a time, but were grounded for various reasons. Do you see anything common in the stories of these 4 businessmen whom you have chronicled in the book?
Right. First of all, they were all born within a decade of each other. So when India was liberalized in the 90s, they were all in their late 20s, early 30s. And so they did not have to face the kind of red tapeism and bureaucracy the previous generation had to face. The second thing is, they had access to, banks, friends in political circles, except for Naresh Goyal, who was, born in a modest family. The rest of the gentlemen were born in affluent, well-connected families. So they all had the kind of advantage an average educated person of their vintage in India would not have had. And Naresh Goyal, he made up for the lack of the initial advantage through his excellent networking skills and contacts, both amongst financiers and politicians. So, they developed their companies to become market leaders in the respective industries they operated in. But their risk appetite was way off the charts. So, how do you balance getting a good product and a brand to the market and sustain it? And make it a sustainable business, which means your finances should be in order. How do you engage with politicians? They were not the first people to engage with politicians. G.D. Birla did it, J.R.D. Tata, Dhirubhai Ambani, Mukesh Ambani, and now the Adanis. So they were not the first people to be politically connected. But what distinguishes entrepreneurs who further their businesses using political contacts and those who get sucked into that vortex? That is what this book tries to explore.
Apart from the obvious political support that they got during the growth of their respective businesses, in growing their respective businesses, uh, was it also something that was uh, one can describe as overweening ambition, to ambition running ahead of themselves when they had successful businesses, but still trying to get more successful if that is possible? The overweening ambition which brought them to the ground. Like, for instance, Vijay Mallya, he had an excellent liquor business going. And as they say, the best way for a billionaire to become a millionaire is to start an airline. And he
Right,
did exactly that, right?
right.
So, is it ambition?
Yes, I would describe these entrepreneurs as Icarus entrepreneurs. You know, they soar to the sky, uh, uh, powered by the waxy paraffin wings of political connections on one side and debt on the other. And if you don't have cash flows from your businesses backing that, you get scorched and fall to the ground. And that is what happened to these gentlemen.
Yeah. So it's more miscalculation in their businesses, taking on more risks than they should have. That probably was their nemesis, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Correct.
But are these kind of businessmen unique to the Indian landscape, or in your experience from sitting where you are in Singapore, researching Asia Pacific, do you see similar instances elsewhere in the world?
Yes, yes, including, I mean, it still happens in Europe via card. It still happens, uh, in the US, the entire global financial crisis and mortgage-backed securities and Archegos Capital more recently. So this entire human ambition and greed getting ahead of itself and ignoring the fundamentals is by no means unique to India. It happens across the world. And also in the Indian context, if you had looked at Reliance before the massive fundraising of 2019, or the entire house of debt reports between 2012 and 15, uh, there are all these companies which were over leveraged. Let's begin with the house of debt reports put out by Credit Suisse. It's there in the public domain, an excellent report for everyone to see. And so every single entity covered, whether it was GMR or Lancor or the Reliance ADAG group, that is the Anil Dhirubhai Ambani group, collapsed, barring one entity, which is the Adanis. They're still going strong with financed by debt on one side. They have great execution skills, but they're supported by debt on one side and political connections on the other. So, so this is by no means unique, but it's just the similarities of these four gentlemen which prompted me to write this book.
Excellent. I mean, you mentioned Adani's. That was the subject of my next question. I wanted to, just probe you whether the lessons from the demise, not demise of the businesses, or rather the fall from grace of these four gentlemen, whether the lessons have been learned in India by businessmen, or are we seeing a repeat of some of these tragic stories of leveraging, over leveraging, building on your businesses when you already have a successful business to fall back upon, to run, trying to get into unrelated areas, diversifying without logic. Do you see any of that still happening, or have lessons been learned?
No, the lessons haven't been learned by all stakeholders, sadly. And it's not just in India, as the final chapter of my book says. World over, the lessons haven't been learned. And the stakeholders, bankers and lenders doing their due diligence before lending monies, credit rating agencies, sometimes it's a genuine professional lapse, but sometimes even the rating agencies get sucked in this market euphoria and either delay or make wrong calls. And the regulators, they are usually slow to react. And my disappointment with India is that we don't have an active whistleblowing mechanism with the identity of the whistleblower protected. I mean, it's really sad, this entire ICICI Bank saga. There was this shareholder in ICICI Bank and Videocon who deciphered what was happening, and he put it up in a blog, and it took 5 years for the whole thing to blow up. And ILNFS, their profits declined. Everyone says complex business, but their profits were declining. They started making losses. They started paying dividends out of their reserves. And for the spectacular performance, the senior management team was given nice rises. There were tons of whistleblowers on the other side. So the sad saga continues, and we as a capital scarce economy cannot afford this.
So it is not just amongst businessmen, but it's also amongst regulators and policymakers that lessons have not been learned. We are not putting in place systems to ensure that there are no more Siddharthas or Vijay Mallyas who can take the system for a ride.
No, sadly, we are not. And the airline, yes. I mean, for everyone who says begin with a billionaire and then you can start an airline and become a millionaire, there's Indigo Airlines, which show that in a price sensitive market like India, you can buy exactly the same model. Your fleet is homogeneous. You save on the spare parts. You enter into favorable lease terms. You keep your debt low, you offer no frills service, and you make a profit and pay dividends year on year. That's the way you operate. But that aside, the regulator, three committees have been constituted by the government: the TIMS committee in pre-independent India, the Rajadaksh committee in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken, and the Naresh Chandra committee in the 90s. And they said exactly the same thing: government stay out of airlines, regulate the sector, and don't let too many players inside so that there's no price competition. But the government has ignored it again and again, and the latest escapade is one Udan, which is the hub and spoke model, with the government trying to connect the small towns to the metros through flights. We have good railways, we have great buses. Why this? So that is something which is, and now the government refuses to learn from the airline experience and wants to fund BSNL, which is a debt business. We don't learn our lessons.
We don't learn our lessons. Yeah, I think that would apply as much to other countries as well, right? Is it a curse of capitalism in a way that people get greedy beyond a point, and regulators are always two steps behind?
I agree with you on that. Capitalism works not because it's efficient, but because a more efficient way of doing business hasn't been discovered. And so business losses and these stratospheric valuations which happened in the IPOs last year, with most of the stocks languishing now, the loss of capital both through such overpriced listing and failed businesses are the curse of capitalism. And we in India are refusing to be more careful because we are, despite being a capital scarce economy.
Yeah, that's right. So, as I said earlier, it's a very well researched book, deeply researched, and it has a lot of information. As a financial analyst yourself, you have put out several tables, several graphics that talk about the numbers of each of these gentlemen, which uh, led to their eventual exits. How difficult was it for you to gather the information? How difficult was it to get to the primary sources of information, and how long did it take for you to write this book?
It took me about a year to write the book, and actually, the effort put to collate the information and analyze it was difficult, but the information per se is there, it's easily available, which kind of led me to the conclusion that it was not genius which leads to fraud and failures. It is just lapses in oversight, because even in the case of Island FS or Jet or Kingfisher Airlines, the information was there. I mean, how could bankers convert uh, the debt to equity at a price of Kingfisher Airline that prevailed 3 years ago? The current price is one third that price. Would you do it if it was your money? So it was obviously crony capitalism.
Yeah. So I know you're not a religious person too much, but you do read extensively on religion. You're read on religion, and you're also spiritually oriented. Would you think that the stories of these four people, gentlemen, who you that you've chronicled, the ending is a bit of karma getting back? You build your business using unethical means, cutting corners, grabbing public money from banks, not repaying them, and then you discover that whatever you try to build with all that is it's coming crashing down. So is that karma getting back?
I I suppose Newton's law is a linear interpretation of karma. So when you when when these entrepreneurs consciously and unconsciously harmed the other stakeholders in an economy, uh, at some point, it worked to their detriment. So that is the of course you can cite multiple cases and say it didn't happen to this person and it is not happening to some other person. uh, we would have to wait and launch, because this empire building based on debt is just not sustainable. So and there are limits to human ability. So if these are the takeaways, I think, I mean, this is what I learned while writing this book, because there's no reason why these gentlemen were smart, they were savvy, they were well connected, they had an advantage which very few of us have, and yet they tripped.
That's right. Someone like Anil Ambani, he was given a set of well-run businesses, running businesses, and also cash, a lot of cash. We understand was given to him as compensation for Reliance Industries going to the elder brother.
Right.
But all of that was squandered, right? So
True.
it is
And
not just. Yes, sir.
expansion after expansion. I mean, it was that. I mean, first of all, yes, he got a lot of money because the split Reliance Industries was the cash cow. So the companies he got a bunch of startups which were highly indebted, and he need. I mean, he since it was a bequest, the money had to be given to him to to make up for the cash cow. But the breakneck expansion, Reliance Power, Reliance Communications, Reliance Capital, and even when the entire conglomerate was in trouble, Reliance Naval, uh, the defense uh, business, it was clearly unsustainable.
Yeah, yeah. I have a couple of questions from readers. I'm sorry, from people watching the show. As a journalist, readers comes naturally to me. Pardon me for that. So this question is, it says, was it only appetite for risk, or there were ethical issues to the core which led to the downfall of these businessmen?
Okay, so as I said, when it comes to Vijay Mallya, he was in the Parliamentary Committee for Civil Aviation, and he was heading an airline, which meant he could fashion legislation to his benefit. So it was not only unethical of Vijay Mallya, but it was also unethical of the government to have done that. Similarly, the famous 5/20 rule of Naresh Goyal, saying an airline, the whole thing was done. Airlines have to fly for 5 years and have a fleet of 20 aircraft before they can go to international airlines. That was done so that Jet Airways had the first mover advantage when it came to international routes. So yes, there were. In addition, it is this high risk appetite which I suppose nudges people to act in unethical ways, because they're only keen to build empires. Whether these empires are sustainable or not probably doesn't strike them.
Yeah, and when you have friends in government who will grease the process for you to get a good loan or convert a bad loan into equity, like as you mentioned in the case of Kingfisher Airline, or fashion policies to your benefit, like how Naresh Goyal did with airline policy in this country.
Right.
So I think it's very easy to adopt unethical means.
Absolutely. You're right.
Yeah. So there's another question. Crony capitalism is on the rise. Is it linked to political parties' funding needs? Do you cover this connection between political parties' funding needs and crony capitalism?
Not in the book. I hope to write more books down the line. But yes, but when you read the book, you realize that money has been channeled to unexplained sources. In the case of some of the gentlemen covered in the book.
Okay. This actually, we have quite a few questions here for you. Maybe I'll pick up a couple. There's a gentleman who wants to know, are there steps taken by the Indian government to ensure sufficient checks and balances are put in place to prevent such fraud committed by these people? If so, are these happening fast enough?
Well, the checks and balances are in place, but then I was watching Shekhar Gupta's cut the clutter, and in one of the episodes he mentions that Sharad Pawar helped Vijay Mallya get a loan even when Kingfisher was reportedly broken. So in the case of public sector banks, there is this telephone banking which goes on. So 90% of the loans goes through due process, and then the top boss calls and says give the loan, and then the credit appraisal is written to meet that purpose. So that happens in the case of public sector banks, and in the case of private sector banks also some decisions are taken top down. And as long as bonuses in private sector banks are tied to the disbursements made and are given upfront in the form of cash bonuses and employee stock options, this uh, chase for disbursement will happen. It's not staggered. I mean, nobody tells a relationship manager, I will pay 50% of your cash bonus today, and then 25% next year, and 25% the year after, depending on how your loans will perform. Then it is in the, and it doesn't happen world over. It's not just India. So as long as your incentives are skewed, such lapses will happen.
Okay, there's a request that the names of the questioners be announced. So the last question was by Arun Armugam. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. This is from Sridhar Kalyanaraman. Where or what is the deterrent for the lenders if nothing has changed? Then is it business as usual?
See, the deterrent for the lenders is the telephone email connections between politicians and public sector banks should be cut, and the bonuses and compensation structure for private sector banks should be changed. If this doesn't happen, then asset quality of banks, and we are a bank loan dependent market, and it will also help uh, to to somehow kickstart India's bond market, because if a company performs badly and the bond price starts falling, the bond yield will go up basically, and then bankers will find it very difficult to justify why they are lending money to these lenders at low interest rates. So it for the bank, to save the banks from themselves, it pays to have a vibrant bond market.
Even a
So
corporate bond market.
yes, it should be made a lot more vibrant, so that there is a check and balance in. I mean, there are enough checks and balances, but the optimists that we are, we do hope if there's a bond market, some more sense will be dinned into the bankers.
That's coming from a debt analyst. I think it should be taken seriously. Arun Kumar Ralapalli wants to know whether the senior scenario would be different in Singapore. Something like this would ever happen in a place like Singapore.
Things have happened in Singapore. Two commodity traders, one of which was a Temasek portfolio company, was a victim of a short seller attack, Olam, whose founder is incidentally of Indian origin. And just now, the Hong Kong commodity trader, the Noble Group, was fined. But because the political system in Singapore is different, Singapore banks do have non-performing assets, but the level is much lower because you don't have telephone banking that much in Singapore. But once again, Singapore is a bank loan dependent market, and the bond market is not as large or vibrant. So
Okay.
that is also something we need to take into account.
So I know we are almost out of time. Just one last question from another viewer. This is Mr. Ramesh Kumar. He wants to know, there are many bankrupt businessmen on a much bigger scale than Malia. Would you say that they're not in the limelight so much because they're also flamboyant in their lifestyles, like in steel or mining industries?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I agree with that, and I should congratulate and convey my appreciation to Ravi Nandula, Business Line's cartoonist, whom Raghuveer introduced to me. So he gave me a cartoon to end the book, which says there's a part, meet and greet for high net worth individuals, and one banker tells the other, his is a rags to riches story, rags for the bankers and riches to himself. So that is the story of entrepreneurship in India.
Thank you, Nandini. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to reading the book and publishing more of your columns in business. I omitted to mention that Nandini has been a columnist in Business Line for the last 6 years and has written excellent columns for us. Look forward to seeing more of you in Business Line. Thank you so much, Bangalore Business Lit Fest, and good evening to all of you again.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Raghuveer.
thanks,
Thank you,
Raghuveer,
Nandini,
for moderating this, and thanks, Shankar and Benedict, for giving me this opportunity.
Pleasure is ours. Thank you.
So we've had an exciting 4 sessions today. I think it's nice to see the trajectory that we took. We started with really the potential of India. We heard directly from a shark. We had a moderator who's written about youngsters and how they are building businesses. We looked at how India can grow. What are the areas from solar to dairy to how India can grow, and then we reach the other end of the spectrum, the frauds, the not so nice stories, the characters that have eroded some of the wealth of this nation. So we've really traversed the entire trajectory, and a very interesting conversations this evening. Thank you to all our authors and speakers and moderators.
Thank you.
Benedict,
Thank you.
over to you.
Bye-bye.
Yes. So yeah, final thank you to Raghuveer and Nandini. Be in touch soon.
Thank you, Benedict. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
same
Bye
here.
bye.
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 Okay. Ganesh. Oh yeah, thank you so much, Subha, for anchoring this today's session excellently. Uh, and
Thank
the
you
sum
so
up
much.
was equally good. Just hang in there as we just sum it up. In the sense, announce tomorrow's
Sure.
program, just like that. Uh, Ganesh, can we have the sponsors? Yeah, before that, can we have the sponsors and partners charts? Yeah. So a big thank you to IBS Business School, part of the ICFI Business School group, for being the title sponsor of this 8th edition, and also to award sponsor PS Capital. And one of the big strengths of Bangalore Business Literature Festival is its good network of partners. Uh, yeah, and we have these partners for a long time, so they really help us connect with the networks. I am Bangalore, your story as media partner, and Just Books Blossom bookstore has been around for quite some time. So we hope to grow this partnership network more in the coming years, and uh, look forward to you joining tomorrow again. Tomorrow we have lined up really interesting sessions, and yeah, we have a session on Indian CSR 2.0, embracing the man mission tango, and the future of money by Ishwar Prasad. It promises to be a riveting session, and India's energy future and built environment. See you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.